Hi, this is Lance Wallnau, back with you again, and welcome to Firewall. And today I have a very special guest who just happened to be in town. Actually, we're going to have dinner, and I said, well, why don't you come by the studio? Because Pastor Ché Ahn has been a friend of mine for years, a phenomenal global ministry, but on the forefront of what's happening with the battle that's going on with churches in the United States. It seems prophetically right that this would be what you're doing, because for years you've pioneered a message about apostolic Christianity.
That's right.
And really it was Jesus talking to the apostles. He said, you'll be brought before rulers and governors. And I always thought, if you've really got it, you end up on a collision course with what's going on in governance.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, Peter Wagner, both our spiritual dad, taught us about the apostolic ministry and really encouraged me. And also Cindy Jacobs. You know, I was just pastoring a church and she prophesied to me, I've called you to be an apostle, says the Lord, and you'll be like Abraham, a father of many, and you will have churches in every single continent. And by God's grace, since 1996, we're now in 70 nations. But the Lord spoke to me in 2018 to turn my heart back to the United States, not knowing that I was going to be senior pastor again in 2019, not knowing that I'll end up suing the governor of California in 2020.
And your focus was on churches, and it was on planting churches.
It was missions. It was planting churches internationally. That was our whole thing, to establish apostolic centers in world-class cities around the world. And so we have booming ministries in India, for example, 20,000 plus in Uttar Pradesh, one of the most unreached parts of India. And so we're so excited about what God's doing there, and the Philippines, Kenya. I mean, we're all over, 70 nations. But the Lord had something special for the United States, and he called me back to the United States in 2018 through another prophetic word from Ed Savoso. He called me up and said, I need to meet with you, and I'm willing to fly from San Jose down to Pasadena just to deliver this word. And I said to Ed, I said, with all due respect, I'm in between going to 2 around the world trips. Can you just FaceTime me? Can we just talk on the phone? And he says, no, I need to deliver this specifically. And Sue is listening to the conversation.
That's your wife.
And that's my wife, and who's very prophetic in my life. And she said, I think you need to meet with him. This is not like Ed to want to fly down, pay his own expense to meet with me. And so we took him out to lunch. We were all just on the edge of our seat to know what this word is. And he prophesied, he says, God's going to give you a great harvest in California, but you have to turn your heart back to California and to Los Angeles. And actually, I had a hard time receiving that because I'm all over the world and not really. My son became the senior pastor in 2016 of our church, not knowing that he would go on a sabbatical and God would speak to him to resign from being a senior pastor, and that I would be senior pastor again in January of 2019. And so here we are overseeing this great apostolic center, which is a mother church for our network of churches around the world. And you know, I want to just say I've not planted these churches around the world, but we're more of a catalyst to encourage people to plant churches, as well as adopt churches that are looking for alignment. And so I don't want to give the...
no, absolutely.
Yeah, so...
It's a big enough story without having to...
Well, I just want to qualify, just make sure people understand that,
But the 162 churches in California, now that's significant, because now you get this word from the state after complying like all the pastors did and have done, and then you're kind of like, you want to, you have a call to neglect not the assembling of yourselves together. There's great science on the side of getting it can be done.
Absolutely.
And you're willing to pay the extra money to do it, and that's what you do. That's your job.
Well, absolutely. And ultimately is to honor him, is to worship him, to come together. I mean, we were having online services, and that's fine to a certain extent, because there are over 50 one another's that you cannot do online, whether it's to pray for one another, greet one another, love one another in a very practical way that you cannot do. And so here's the thing that was the overreach. Not only did Governor Newsom say you cannot sing or chant, that's actually a quote from him.
What?
For the first time, we have an elected official telling us how to worship. And as you know, in the First Amendment, the state should not establish a religion, state religion, or interfere with the free exercise thereof. And now he's interfering with how we're to worship. And then he not only locks down the church when he did it, the second time, He also locks down Bible studies. You cannot meet in homes. If you have one person coming to your house that's not part of your family, you're illegally meeting. And we thought this is way too much. And then contrast that with the protest that was taking place with the George Floyd death, which was tragic. All of us saw that. But he's encouraging people to protest, exercise your First Amendment right.
I got the quote here. This is what got me. This is when I knew I had to talk to you. On June 1st, Governor Newsom said to those burning and looting and demolishing cities, get this, for those of you out there protesting, I want you to know that you matter. To those who want to express themselves, God bless you. Keep doing it. Your rage is real. So he's got a God bless you for the protesters. Right. And
well, it is a religion. I believe socialism is not just an economic philosophy. It's become an ideology. It's become a religion.
It is.
And of course, Marxism is religion. There's the root of it. And so it's that the state becomes God and you become God. It's really going back to the Garden of Eden, eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil.
Right.
And you'll be like God. And so that temptation is always there. And they have bought into the lie idea. It goes back to the not a great awakening, but the enlightenment that we can solve everything. And so you have that dualism where you be the church, but we'll take care of the state. We're smarter. We know how to run government. We know how to do business. And so that came in, the separation of church and state kind of mentality came in during that Enlightenment period, which led, of course, to the French Revolution.
Yeah, that really worked out well for France.
Yeah, right. And every place where socialism has gone, of course, is ruined. Whatever the left touches, it just ruins. I can't even watch the NBA now because plastered on the basketball floor is Black Lives Matter. Yeah. And Black lives do matter as far as the dignity of the individual. But the organization, you and I know, the founders are Marxists, and it just ruins everything. They're in cahoots with China.
Yep.
And the NBA, they won't speak negatively about China. And of course, China, again, not the Chinese people. I go to China all the time. I love the Chinese people, but the communist nation, that totalitarian state that is oppressing the Uyghur Muslims, but not only but pastors are being arrested right now, put into the same concentration camps and forced to make Nike shoes. It's slavery. It's modern day slavery, and so I just made a commitment. I'm not going to buy anything Nike anymore because I can't support corporate America that's in bed with Marxists.
It's such hypocrisy. It's hypocrisy because they put the money into this. And then one of the vowed purposes of Black Lives Matter is the destruction of the nuclear family. And people don't realize what that means. It means that if you're a man and a woman with a child, you're the target of what Nike and Amazon and these other companies are investing in destroying. And they're globalist. Yeah. And so we got to really get educated on this stuff. They're not getting attacked. You'll notice that you don't see Google headquarters getting attacked.
Right.
You're going to see every small business attacked because that's middle America, and communism can't thrive if you're going to have people that are independent.
Now, a lot of people get confused because they think that, aren't you a conservative? Aren't you for free market? Aren't you for capitalism? And we are, but with virtue, with values, with biblical values. And so if you don't have that, and you're just motivated by making money, then the love of money is the root of all evil. And that's what I see with Nike. I see with these major corporations that's funding the Democratic Party, by the way. And so I see the Soros, they're making a lot of money, but they don't have the values of Judeo-Christian values that we believe in. And so with the values, and you become a free market capitalist, then you will use that money properly to advance God's kingdom, to help the poor. I'm talking about really helping the poor.
Yeah, and here's the insidious thing. So it's an interesting conversation here. The capitalists will say, well, we're paying taxes. And you see what the government does with your tax money. It's so efficient and it's helpful. It's a waste of money. So the taxes are going to the government, which expands the bureaucracy. And they're saying, well, people can make wealth in the stock market. But let's be honest about it. The manufacturer, the laborer, the person who needs the money the most to get from poverty into the middle class or to move up in the middle class, they're not big Wall Street investors.
That's right.
That's the rich getting richer. And so you have this rich getting richer off of that. Trump came along and he said this, and I don't think, I could almost lose my Holy Spirit sanctification with what people, Christians that don't understand Trump. But he says, I don't have any donors. Do you guys know what that means? People can figure it out. He was saying, I don't represent a single Wall Street company. I don't represent anything but America.
Right.
And I'm here to get the jobs and the manufacturing back. The reason why these guys are paying Black Lives Matter to go riot and Antifa is getting funded by somebody is because the anarchy helps, they think, to help get Trump out of office. They can go back to business as usual.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, he was on fumes actually in 2016. As you know, you wrote the book, The Chaos Candidate. He was just getting money from blue-collar workers that were supporting him. With Hillary, with her $1 billion war chest, and he just had half of that. And yet he pulled it off because, bottom line, people were out there voting. And I feel, Lance, this election is probably the most historic, consequential election in the history of America. And, you know, you and I have studied American history. I was a history major at University of Maryland, and I feel this is the most important election. And I just want to appeal to believers, evangelical believers. We missed it on the 2018, like 20 million evangelical voters did not show up, and we lost a House, and they've been impeaching. And
20 million didn't show up, and we still have 25 or 30 that are not registered to vote.
That's right. And so I want to encourage you to register and vote biblically, vote based on the values that the Bible teaches. And of course, unfortunately, it's predominantly now, when you look at the platform of the Democratic Party, there's no way I could vote for abortion up to the 9th month abortion period. But I mean, they've gone so extreme, it's crazy. I mean, we're talking about infanticide, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's a child.
It is a child.
It's a child.
And we know with modern medicine that a child can live after 3 months outside of the womb. And yet up to the 9th month or the 8th month, you want to take that life. All my kids were like 2 weeks to 3 weeks early, you know? It's just part of life. And yet it's just madness that we're living in, where people think this is good, this is, you know, and Isaiah 5:20 says that will come a time where people will call good evil, evil good, darkness light, light darkness. And that's where we're at, is that they think they're being really good by saying we're going to take care of your health care, we're going to take care of your college tuition, we're going to having the greening of America. How we're going to afford that is not, just doesn't add up. It's crazy.
Yeah, so you take we are already almost at a $28 to $29 trillion.
That's right, and counting.
And I don't think, Americans and Christians have to sober up and understand something, that the world will let us use our dollars. We're the only people in history that can print. Don't you think Venezuela would love to go to the basement and print money and get out of this problem?
Yeah.
Well, you can't, because you got super-inflation, and nobody wants your money because your money's monopoly money. It's worthless.
Exactly.
So the worst thing that could happen would be if the world would lose confidence that America actually can manage itself, and China comes along, who is right now saying this should happen, and says, I think our currency and our economy and listen, our culture is better than those nut jobs. They're blowing up their own cities. You can't trust them. Trump's not even there. Donald Trump is, as much as people hate him, this is the reality. People have confidence that if Trump's there, he's going to get the economy going. They may not like him,
yeah.
But there's stability. But money will flee if you don't have him there. And it's weird. And you know what? Money can come if he stays, because with Brexit, the UK, Boris is waiting to do a deal with Trump, and he's out of Europe, so he could trade. The UK could trade independently. There's things that God could do for America, which we don't deserve, but if the Christians align, God will give us an extension of peace, because we are at 85 cents out of a dollar of global evangelism comes from this country.
Well, I think the left knows that. That's why 10 of the top unemployed states in America are all run by Democrats. They are locking down the economy when the numbers don't even show. I mean, like in California, the 5th richest state in our nation. I mean, if it was a nation, it would be the 5th richest in the world.
Yep.
And yet,
it's the biggest economy.
The biggest economy, right, in the United States. And yet, we've had 11,000, a little over 11,000 that have died which is tragic. Any death is terrible from coronavirus, but we're talking about 40 million people
40 million,
in our state.
And we're talking about like SARS statistics. We're talking about emphysema. We're talking about influenza. All right, we're going to have to take a break right now. And because I know my team disciplines me on this stuff. So we're going to take a break, and then we're going to come right back.
Lance Wallnau has just released his latest book, God's Chaos Code.
You need to know the code. You need to know what's happening right now. There is a code in the chaos. There's a purpose in the shaking. Once you see this, it's going to give stability and strength to you. God is literally raising up an awakening generation right now. It's hidden in the code.
You need to know the code. Pre-order God's Chaos Code now at godschaoscode.com.
We are back in the studio with Pastor Ché Ahn, and this conversation is just, I wanted to cover all these things. I didn't want to cover them all at one time, but we're covering everything I wanted to talk about. We have a graphic here. I think we'll bring it up at home for people. But this is, I just saw this today. The new poll asked Americans how many people in the country have had the COVID virus. They ought to call it the Wuhan virus, what they ought to do. The answer is 20% they think have had it, 9% have died. Look at those little dots. That represents the trauma that Americans have gone through. The reality is it's 1%.
Yeah.
And that's the green dots, and then you got 0.04%, and that little red dot, it's the statistical dot, proportionate to how much that represents on the map. But in reality, in California...
Well, California, we're talking about 0.0002% chance that you will die of COVID. Now, if you even take the 78 years old and above, which is comprises 45% who've died in California, if we just quarantine the elderly, those with underlying condition, and just open up the economy, we would be doing just fine. But I believe that Newsom and the other Democrats of the 10 highest unemployed states have an agenda to lock down the economy because they know that will make Trump look bad, and they're doing everything possible. They're trying to hit the Achilles heel because they know Trump has brought our nation.
Absolutely, it is so wicked. You know what it's like doing?
It's evil under the sun.
It is. It's like it's hurting America.
That's how
hurting
selfish they are.
People in order to slander someone else.
Well, to be in control. Actually, to be in control.
To have control.
They want to be in control, and they hate Trump, but you see no compassion towards the people. I mean, we have people in our church that have lost their jobs, lost their businesses, and there's just no compassion for them. I mean, I feel more for them than I do about us, saying we're still going to meet as a church, because at least we have people who are giving their tithes and offerings, and we're meeting. So the lockdown hasn't really hurt the church overall in California, but it's really hurt people.
And there's some interesting data on this, Ché, that Mark Nuttall is a friend of, do you know Mark? Mark's an economist advisor. And so 54% of America actually, from Social Security to unemployment to working as in the military or the Postal Service or the government, 54% of Americans get a government check. So that means that they're relatively unaffected. So that's part of the illusion of stability. The 70% of the economy that's driven by self-employed small business.
That's right.
Is where the tax money comes from.
Right.
It's not Wall Street and the corporations. You have the lion's share is all the franchises that you see getting blown. You see the bricks going through those windows. It's the Subways. It's the Starbucks franchise. So those small businesses are driving 70% of the economics, but they're getting slaughtered because they can only last so long. The government, the trillions of dollars that have been allocated, have not been intelligently distributed for small businesses. You got, multiple millions going to the Kennedy Center or to NPR radio. I mean, it's really, it should drive us nuts that with a country in the dangerous debt situation we're in, that there are Democrats earmarking, we will only accept this $1 trillion package to help people if we get a couple of $100 million for our friends. But I mean, this stuff's real.
Well, I think the devil has overplayed his hand. And so I know that Satan comes to steal, kill, and destroy. And what's happening in California is that I think we're going to see a real shift take place, because I think people who are predominantly Democrats in California, as you know, Hillary won the popular vote by 3 million, most of it from California. And so we're talking about people that are fed up with this liberal left agenda. They've been so hurt by this coronavirus. I think they're going to shift and vote for Trump. I think the moms who can't send their kids to school because the schools are locked down in California, I think they're going to shift.
Schools are locked down.
Yeah.
I hate to say this, but the teachers' unions,
oh my goodness,
are getting paid, are negotiating for a pay increase, and are not even working. And the California families now, here's what you saw it happen in New York. So with Cuomo, he was trying to lead and do the same thing.
Right.
But you see, I think the Californians are like so laid back. You are kind of cool. You're chill that way. But in New York, you want to get an earful, you get a mother in Brooklyn or Queens. You get a Democrat who is mad at you in government.
Right.
Brother, you repent. And he repented. He said, oh, well, wait, was I thinking? Of course they were going to get back to school.
Exactly. Well, I think you have a lot of ticked off mothers in California now.
Okay, mothers in California, make the phone call.
Absolutely. And, you know, the Lord spoke to me when I came back to California in 2018, that California will one day be a pro-life, pro-family state. And I thought maybe 40 years from now, what is this? But, you know, I think even with this coronavirus, we're going to see a lot of people shift because they have just been tired of the lockdown, the overreach, because the numbers don't show. We have had a flat line as far as deaths go, and you know, we have so many people to test, and yet there's not a spike taking place in California.
It's so insidious. You know, I hate to say it, but I think that, I know it, because I got the data here. I believe that they're extending the virus resolution till, like, they're saying, well, when is it going to end? I listened to someone in California today. They said, well, we have a vaccine. We don't have a vaccine for anything else, and you're not shutting down the economy.
Exactly.
So it's becoming a tool for control.
Yeah.
It's becoming a tool, I think, to block people from being able to go to polling stations so that they can control the ballot box by mail.
And here's the biggest lies. They're saying we're going by science, by data. And even Joe Biden said, if the scientists tell me, I'll lock down as soon as I become president to deal with this. But, you know, there are other scientists, like psychologists and psychiatrists. What about mental health? What about the suicides that are taking place, the drug overdose, alcoholism? What about domestic violence, child abuse that are taking place? As a pastor, things are off the charts of counseling needs.
No doubt. And there's a ratio. And I'm listening to a progressive liberal today. Who was on the video. Actually, it was a lesbian progressive liberal, and she's talking with Bob McCoy. She's on his team because she's furious with what the government's doing. And she said she's in therapy. She works with a therapist, and that for every $10 million of financial burden in the country, there is a corresponding suicide ratio. So debt and distress, which, you know, from the opioid crisis was, it hit the manufacturing part of America, the Rust Belt, massively because of the depression that people were under, coping when they're unemployed, have no money, have no self-respect, and no purpose.
Right, exactly. I mean, it was bad in 2008. This is much worse. And so we're seeing the overdose. I mean, Washington Post had an article about the percentage of people who have died from overdose, drug overdose, since the COVID-19, since the lockdown. And it's just like every month is doubling since like April. And this is Washington Post.
Folks, that's the science. You get what we're saying?
Yeah, right.
It's not that we're being, you know, Bible-thumping Neanderthals. It's like the science dictates that people are playing games.
See, he has knowledge. He's getting information, Governor Newsom and other Democratic governors. But they don't have wisdom, because it's more than just, you know, going based on some scientist, some medical doctor. You have to take everything into account. And of course, this lockdown has been so damaging. I feel people need to rise up. Their civil rights have been abused.
Well, yeah, and besides this, science would say, take a look at Sweden. Take a look at the countries that said, the heck with this. We're just going to we're going to take our older people, quarantine them.
Exactly.
We're going to have social distancing. We'll do the sanitizing thing. But we're business, open up. And compare them to like Norway or to other countries that follow.
You know, even in our churches, we have 160 churches in ministry now. One person have died of COVID. We've had some that did get COVID in one particular church, the pastor and the staff, but they all survived. We've not had one case in our church as well, because what we've done is that, look, it's not like we're just meeting haphazardly. We mitigate, we encourage all those with underlying condition, no matter what age, stay at home. We take everyone's temperature as they come into the building for worship. They're wearing masks.
All right, so pay attention to this. So this is what they go through. And by the way, they have a phenomenal. You have the
Ambassador Auditorium.
Ambassador Auditorium. I mean, this is where I always say, I'm always advertising for you. This is where Frank Sinatra and Celine Dion sang here. This is the symphony's been here.
Pavarotti,
I even watch
right
episodes of Columbo. I'm looking at I'm going, Annabelle, look, I filmed that at Ché's place.
That's right. Frank Sinatra sang there. Pavarotti, before he passed away, he did his last solo opera.
Well, it's like an opera with gold baffles and emerald wall, and the world's longest singular mahogany, rail on a stair. Anyway, so what do you got to go through to get people in church?
Well, we have to sanitize the whole building. We're the expense of opening that place up. So it's actually a hassle to meet, but we feel that we're pleasing God, we're honoring Him, and hopefully we're taking a prophetic stand to encourage other pastors. Because here's the point I want to make. 2 Timothy 1:7, we quote it all the time. God's not given us a spirit of fear, but power, love, and a sound mind. That word fear is not the normal Greek word, which is phobia, used in other passages. It is the Greek word dileia, which means cowardice, being a coward.
I want to hold on that thought right there. God hasn't given us a spirit of cowardice. He's given us a spirit of power, love, and a sound mind.
Yeah.
And we're going to do part 2. We're going to do a 2-part interview because there's too much to talk about here, but I'm going to be seeing you again next on our next Firewall.
As a pandemic wreaks havoc and angry mobs burn our cities, Lance Wallnau explains why this is happening and takes you into the ancient text he describes as God's Chaos Code. This is the exciting sequel to Lance's best-selling book, God's Chaos Candidate, where he predicted Donald Trump would be president. God's Chaos Code predicts this exact moment in history and what is coming next.
When you're in the midst of shaking and uncertainty, the one thing that can give you confidence is knowing what God has said about the time that you're in. If the Lord tells you ahead of time what's going to happen, you can be certain things are going to be working out. The Lord has given us that code in the Bible. He's told us what's coming in America, what's coming to the nations. He's literally given us the chaos code. We can understand what's happening and be awakened in the midst of it. You need to understand and get this chaos code.
You need to know the code. Pre-order God's Chaos Code now at godschaoscode.com.
People are always asking me, how do we get in touch with you? Or how do we find out about what you're doing and broadcasts? Well, here's the fastest way to do it. We're on Instagram and Facebook. We have a YouTube channel. And we have podcasts that are available on Google Play and on Apple iTunes. So remember, it's Lance Wallnau. The spelling's a little strange, Wallnau. And we're available on all the platforms you could possibly want. Just check us out.
On next week's episode of Firewall with Lance Wallnau.
So you have all these mega churches. I don't want to cast aspersion on them. I won't mention their name. But they're afraid. They're afraid. And this is where I feel that we need revival.
Thank you for watching today's episode of Firewall with Lance Wallnau. For more information, visit lancewallnau.com.